Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast, where the former president of the NFU tells MPs it's time civil servants got their wellies on to see what life is really like on the farm.
To start off with, I said they should be sleeping in the lambing sheds, and then I decided that was better to change that and say they should be helping in the daytime.
We'll hear more later. First, all this week we're discussing animal feed from hay and silage to high-protein pellets. For organic farmers, feed is extra important for their livestock. For many years, organic pig and poultry producers have been able to have up to 5% of their feed mix made up of non-organic matter. But that changed on the 1st of January this year. Any birds over 30 weeks old and pigs over 35 kilos must be fed with 100% organic diets. It brings UK producers in line with EU organic rules. Marie Lennon has been to Eastleach Farm in Gloucestershire to meet Helen Wade and her herd of pigs.
Hello, darling. Hello. All right, you silly. We grow 3 years of cereal and pulse crops, bi-crops, so we grow wheat and beans together and pea and barley usually together, with some oats. And then we sow herbal ley, and then we silage that in the first year, and then in the second year, the pigs go onto it and just dig it up.
And have a lovely time doing it.
Yeah.
This is a commercial organic pig farm, and there aren't many of those. What are your feed costs like?
Oh, huge, and that is why organic pork costs so much more. They are probably 2.5 times a commercial system.
Nice, you walk across the yard, and we are now in your grain store.
Yeah, so in here we've got the wheat and bean mix, the main component of our pig feed. This tank here has got organic oilseed rape oil, and here is our potato protein. So we use a very small amount. We use 5% in our ration of potato protein. It's actually produced in France. Now, currently we're allowed to use this under the derogation of a 5% non-organic protein source. To basically, it replaces soya for us. We only need to use a small amount of this in our ration. So the change that's come in has meant really that we're going to have to use soya. It would be organic soya, which is available, but at the moment it's only available from China, from much further away. And we do have customers that are buying our pork because it's soya-free, which is a real step backwards.
Well, I've left behind those huddles of pigs scuttling about high up on a very green Cotswold hill to come a few miles down the road to a different farm, because that deregulation of the 5% non-organic allowance in feed also applies to poultry. John Newman is farm manager here at Abbey Home Farm near Cirencester. We can't go and see your chickens because of bird flu regulation, but tell me what I would see if I could go and see your chickens.
OK, so we have about 250 to 300 layers, depends on time of year. They're all in one house producing eggs that we sell through our farm shop. And then we also have meat birds that all get processed and go through the farm shop.
Having the 5% allowance of non-organic matter within that organic feed mix, what do you get from that?
So generally the 5% bit that's been in there in the past would be to do with the protected proteins and to do with the supply of amino acid in the ration. Very, very challenging feeding poultry particularly. They seem to be much more vulnerable about how the amino acid balance is in their diet and how that affects either how fast they grow or how many eggs they produce or their overall health and welfare. And it was just about availability, really. It was difficult to get these ingredients organically, so therefore there was an allowance. But there was always a desire to move to that. It's been there for a long time that it would be going out. It's just, I guess, we've now reached the point where, the line is drawn.
And luckily, your supplier has made up that 5%, and now it's completely organic, so you haven't got to do any more legwork. It's the work has been done for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we buy from a supplier who has taken that initiative. And I guess most consumers would have been thinking it was 100% organic feed anyway. So it just feels like we're just kind of catching up a little bit in some respects.
John Newman there at Abbey Home Farm in Gloucestershire. Well, non-organic pig and poultry producers have been looking forward to an extra boost to the protein feed for their animals. Since BSE, or mad cow disease, it's been illegal to feed processed animal protein, or PAP, to farm animals in the UK. PAP is made from leftover carcasses. Originally, BSE was caused by feeding contaminated animal protein from cattle and sheep to cattle and sheep. Poultry and pigs don't carry the same transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, or TSEs, so they are deemed safer. DEFRA consulted on whether PAP from chickens, pigs and insects could now be used to feed pigs and poultry. It's decided to allow the practice, but it's delayed making the changes until the new sanitary and phytosanitary regulations are agreed with the EU. Well, that may be a bit surprising because the EU already allows PAP to be fed to poultry and pigs, which we then import to eat here. I asked Dr. Stephen Mansbridge, reader in Animal Science and Bioinformatics at Harper Adams University, to explain first exactly what PAP is.
Processed animal protein is essentially parts of a carcass that would normally be fit for human consumption, but for one reason or another are not intended for human consumption. So it could be, for example, the ears of pigs that are left on the carcass. Humans don't want to eat those, but we can render them and turn them into processed animal protein for feeding to pets, for example.
For anyone who remembers BSE, that's mad cow disease, this could ring alarm bells. Feeding animal protein to animals. Or some people might say, ooh, that doesn't sound safe.
So the government is only proposing to authorise pig and poultry material and insect material, and some ruminant collagen going into pig and poultry. So pig and poultry don't naturally have the TSE risk.
TSE is transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, isn't it?
So as a big group, TSEs include BSE, and BSE was the one that we were really worried about back in the 1980s. So the pigs and the poultry and the insects are not naturally harbouring the BSE, and these animal proteins are then further processed. So there's strict controls on the feed hygiene requirements and how these proteins have to be processed in order to render them, make them safe.
Does the meat industry really need this product?
For pigs and poultry in particular, the UK is quite reliant on imported soya. This pig and poultry PAP and insect PAP would allow us to have alternative protein sources to reduce our reliance on soybean meal. And it's legal in Europe at the moment, so we are able to import pig or poultry products that have been fed on PAP and then import those products into GB.
Dr. Stephen Mansbridge from Harper Adams University. Civil servants should spend more time on farms to understand the problems they face. That's according to Baroness Minette Batters, who's been facing questions from MPs on the Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs Committee. She was speaking about her Farming Profitability review for England, which was published just before Christmas. There are 57 recommendations in the review, all of which she told MPs should be implemented. The questioning was very wide-ranging, from fairness in the supply chain to the viability of agri-environment schemes and the impact of trade agreements with countries like Australia. Baroness Batters was asked by the committee chairman, Alistair Carmichael, about the proposed farming roadmap, which the government is planning to implement, and how much of a challenge that is.
DEFRA needs to be talking to many more farmers, and that is in the recommendation in the agri-growth hubs and also the catchment approach. There is not a relationship with the farmers on the ground at the moment, which is why so many do not understand what the plan is.
And expanding on that point later, Minette Batters went on to say that the civil service should get out onto farms to learn more about the industry.
I have to say, to start off with, I said they should be sleeping in the lambing sheds, and then I decided that was better to change that and say they should be helping in the daytime in the lambing sheds. But what I was trying to establish was you've got to get out of Whitehall. You've got to get out to understand. Equally, farmers have got to come in. So you've got to have change on both sides of understanding and working and developing together
Baroness Batters was keen to point out that improved profitability on farms should be achieved through food production. She said each farming sector needs its own plan, what she described as sector missions, to monitor food production and encourage more domestic supply as well as exports. There were also detailed questions from the MPs about the future of the Sustainable Farming Incentive, or SFI, which is one of the Environmental Land Management Schemes, or ELMS. This is the replacement for the old direct payments to farmers from the EU. Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales have their own schemes. Baroness Batters said the way the funding worked for ELMS and SFI in England had been wrong.
When I went in was about the time that the SFI was being shut. I think that was a real shock and a real concern to Steve Reed and Daniel Zeitner at the time. If I'm honest, and you have to look back, I think it was set up in totally the wrong way. If you have a scheme that is open-ended and demand-led, you have no idea what the demand will be, so you have no idea of the value that will be demanded. So you can understand why the Treasury would be enormously frustrated by a scheme like that. And then to come into government without the knowledge of this scheme could run out of money. And of course, in the desire in the last Parliament to get the money out the door, the payment rates were raised. So a lot of people then did come forwards. But because, again, it was demand-led and you didn't know what the demand would be, the money disappeared very quickly. So in many ways it was set up to fail. But it is, I think, the SFI can be a really good scheme. And it is the scheme. So we've got to now make it work.
And when she was asked about how the money for projects like landscape recovery should be managed, Baroness Batters was clear that funding was still disproportionately going to larger farms and should be shared out more equally.
The larger you are, the bigger recipient you will be. And that's, in my opinion, wrong from what the initial aim was. Landscape recovery projects are great if you're in one. If you're not, what is there? And so what I have recommended is landscape recovery across all of England. And that is what we need. And what I see more and more and more of is what I would call diamonds in paper crowns. You've got these diamond projects surrounded by a paper crown. And that is wrong. And I think it's particularly wrong for a Labour government to be really focused on, there is another challenge here around decision making. The National Trust is a very, very large landowner. We are seeing large landowners pulling down huge sums of public money. The decisions that are being made are made by those large landowners, not the tenant. And that's why I think that we should look at the new commissioner, Alan Laidlaw, having similar powers to the Grocery Code adjudicator, so that tenant farmers, of which we've got nearly 50% of farmers in England, are tenants. They should be allowed to have a say in all of this, and they don't.
Baroness Minette Batters at the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.